going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
This is an impromptu video. When we awaken in the Matrix and from the Matrix, by the Matrix I reference the systems that have narrowed the awareness, the consciousness, and the bandwidth that the human organisms we are perceive and interact with reality through. And it is done so by those who work on a far more expanded bandwidth. And in doing that, they become architects of certain elements inside the human story that restrict the perceptions, the bandwidth, the awareness by which the majority, the masses, see, interact, and move through reality with. As we begin to awaken, we are on different levels. One of the first parts of awakening in this human organism's life, and as far as I see, the vast majority who end up on this expansion we have called a spiritual journey, it's a human journey of expansion, of understanding our depths as beings, are the injustices of enslavement inside the system. It's usually one of the first things that human beings see as they awaken into this more expanded bandwidth, into this more expanded awareness of reality. They see the tools, the systems of enslavement. They see how they were indoctrinated and programmed with a certain self-image that was very restrictive, with a very restrictive toolbox compared to the one available to ourselves in this infinite cosmos. Yesterday I watched a video by Jordan Peterson, and I have respect for what Jordan Peterson is trying to do in the world, to teach men responsibility. This human organism isn't as studied as that human organism. I haven't got the academic achievements that he has by any measure. However, one thing I can say is that I have the responsibilities in my life and the experience of taking on responsibilities in my life that do mold you into a better man than what you are before that. And so I can get behind that notion. You can't be the head. You can't be the human organism God chose to start a family that has nearly 200 children, as I was, and not respect that. And so I respect that deeply. And what he was referencing within there in this talk is how the Western leadership almost seems to be excelling in stupidity as they maneuver the system, the economy, into a state of potential collapse. He was referencing Bill Gates and how this human being is now buying up all of the farmland and saying that we cannot any longer partake in these practices and we must do things his way. All of this is steering humanity towards a certain space, a certain goal. Jordan Peterson is seeing in a certain expanded bandwidth, a certain expanded awareness, the world from a different perspective, the matrix from a different perspective. I might not be as educated and learned as this human being on the topics he is. However, as this human organism, there are certain elements of time where I have mastered the craft that this human organism has used to serve God. And those who spend the majority of their time however noble, contemplating and reading, naturally don't have the same skill set. It's more atrophied inside those human beings. For the last 12 years, I've spent a minimum of 2 hours every day in complete silence, and I reference a stillness of mind there. I don't mean a silent room whilst my mind is busy. I mean I fell into a state of consciousness that was largely free of the chatter of the mind. On a good day, completely free. As with any human organism, on a difficult day with a health challenge or whatever it may be, it's a little more challenging. But every day, a minimum of 2 hours. Beyond there, I have also fasted many times, 40 days and 40 nights. You can't go through these transformational journeys of consciousness without them changing something about the human organism you are. When I first got free of the 9 till 5 situation I was in, I felt I'd awoken from the matrix. I felt I was free from the matrix. I used to at that point see things in the same space of consciousness whereby I would say, look at Bill Gates doing this, look at the World Economic Forum doing this, look at these world leaders doing what they are. And it is a state where you see it, but you are left completely perplexed by the stupidity of it, unless they are together, united towards a common goal of doing something with this perceived narrative, which is endlessly, persistently confusing and lacking any sort of understanding, and seems to be, as Jordan stated, promoting a stupidity. When you awaken from the matrix, however, your awareness can grow. When you spend time in that space, which the normal state of consciousness and the more restricted awareness and bandwidth of a human calls supernatural, you recognize that sphere of awareness and consciousness is not supernatural. It's a natural functioning of the human organism as it expands. The expansion is whereby the mind, the brain, the senses stay present in the moment and free of an analyzer, free of an observer, free of an experiencer, in a state of unity. The rebirth that Yeshua spoke of, I am confident, is that. The energetic change. Because in there, a certain energy is felt, a certain love. And that love transforms the human organism. It stimulates and activates the intelligence, the actions, the desires of the heart, the thoughts in a completely new way. A different way. But it also allows you to see without the perceptions of the self-image, of the experiencer of the experience, and begin to see reality in a different depth. Jordan Peterson is a Christian, according to what he said. He is a needed man in the world at this time, and his analysis on things is very important for a great many young men in the world. I applaud it. However, there's a depth that he's not reaching into with his space of consciousness. If you are a Christian, you have no option. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but spiritual wickedness in high places. If you are wrestling against spiritual wickedness in high places, how do you come against them? Let's rephrase that. We wrestle not against the 3D matrix and the toolbox of that restricted bandwidth, but we wrestle against a higher dimensional force that is influencing the 3D matrix and our fellow man. It is influencing them for their own goals, their own ends. Biblically, those are the fallen ones. The fallen ones are, for many, a notion, an idea, a game of psychology of the shadow, and for this human organism for a while it was so. But in time, when you spend time in that state of consciousness, in that presence of God, that potent presence, where there's no denying, every day you hear God's voice, you can call on God's guidance. It speaks clear-audibly, in visions, in dreams. It speaks in synchronicity. It answers prayers to lead you to a better goal, a better way for the planet, for humanity, to serve those in need. The longer you spend there, the awareness begins to shift. And no longer when you look at a man like Bill Gates do you see Bill Gates. You see the higher dimensional, the spiritual wickedness in high places working. The higher dimensional forces influencing the 3D matrix and the toolboxes of the humans within there. To stand against the higher dimensional forces and never mention that is a very admirable place, but I'd imagine a very difficult place, because it's very confusing, as it was for this human organism. The longer I've spent there, for whatever reason, as my bandwidth has expanded, I've begun to see things that others have not. I've seen through the veil. I've begun to see energies on other human beings, and I have a long list of human organisms in this world who can give testimony that when I take one of these entities, or multiple of these entities off them, they are left in a state of peace and joy that has been absent from them for some time. Because these entities are real, and they are feeding, controlling those of us who are not in our center, in our presence with God. What is the point of this video? What are these entities about? What's their end goal? The fallen ones want to be God. The field of creation that is given forth through the generous heart of God. The field of creation that is speaking in the human organism as it knits you together in your mother's womb. That field of creation, you have two options. You can choose to surrender to it, and in doing so, the human organism becomes more like Christ. In other words, it mimics that generous outpouring of the unconditioned love of creation coming from the generous heart of God, which pours forth with an inclusion of infinite potential. It had to for it to have meaning. When you surrender to that, when you move into that space of consciousness, it would seem to the memories of this human organism speaking at least, that as you align to that space, the organism begins to mimic that outpouring of energy and wishes to pour out the same love into the world that is felt there. This is that which is Christic. This is the embodiment of what Yeshua spoke of. I and my Father are one, and you will be sons of God too, he said. Sons of God will become one with the Father. That energy pouring out of the field of creation is a love beyond personal love. It's not personal love, it's not relationship love, it's not based on the conditions of a self-image of a character inside the mind. It's based on something different. It's based on the origin of love, the potency of the springing forth of all things, that love. That love that was the generous heart of God who gave way for life with infinite potential. As we surrender to that, we become aligned with that expression. It changes who we are. This human organism was changed by it. My desires changed. My worldly pursuits changed. I haven't been perfect at it. I've fallen out of that space and had to drag myself back with more fasting, etc. But it is a space to aim for. The fallen ones merely wish to supersede it and control it. You can understand it that way. To do that, they want to extract a certain energy from those still living connected to the source, to the spirit. To do that, they use a tool of us collecting energy from the 3D matrix, a fallen world hacked by them. They collect that energy in our wrongdoing that separates us. And as it separates us from that alignment with the original state of Eden consciousness, the friction of that grieving our loving, wonderful God is the energy by which they feed their sojourn of continuing to try and supersede the field of creation through intellectual advancement. Don't believe that demons have no society. Don't believe that what our ancient scriptures spoke of as demons have no society, have no form, have no technology. It's a grave error to think in that way. The path that humanity is being steered towards, when you understand that, we are being given a lot of nutrition, food, energy, sanitation, medical care. It's wonderful. But there is this one poison. And that one poison is to keep us away from that expansive bandwidth and awareness that we have. For in there, everything changes. For when you see men like Bill Gates, you have a spectrum. On this end of the spectrum are men who know God's voice, they know God's presence. It guides them, it talks to them, it's a daily part of them. On this end, there are those who have awoken and are well aware of the fallen ones, and they believe upon their sojourn. They have pacts with them. Some men have pacts with God, some have pacts with the fallen ones, with the fallen one. Between there is a spectrum. Those who touch that they are certain there is a God, but they haven't quite expanded their bandwidth to walk in God daily. The other end of the spectrum, there are those who don't recognize anything. But because they don't recognize anything, the arrogance that their ego has taken the holy place, the throne in the human life, the holy throne is where God should sit to guide you, to steer you. Those where their ego alone, they do not have any notion, any respect for that. They can be controlled by that. And whereas some have pacts openly, they know, others are merely controlled by that. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but spiritual wickedness in high places. They may not even know that they are being influenced. They may not even know that they are being embodied with the ideas of the fallen ones. For the whole of their lives, they haven't had any training to understand what it is to be embodied by a fallen one and not be embodied by one. They've had no training to understand what it means to be surrendered into the will of the one who knit you together into your mother's womb, and the will of their own intelligence and arrogance that mimics the fallen ones want to become this creation field. And so why are we like that, you ask? According to the Sumerians, the human species we were that fell was genetically interfered with by a higher dimensional alien force. It's the oldest creation story on Earth. It's echoed in the Mayan creation story. That we were genetically tampered with to create a slave species, not only to do the bidding in the 3D, but to extract our soul essence from, to feed the higher dimensional force that many of our minds can't comprehend until it's revealed by expanding the bandwidth of our consciousness. To many this sounds like woo, but to many something about it, even if they haven't heard it, whispers a truth to them. In the Garden of Eden we fell. Why? Who was the serpent that made us fall? Is it the fallen DNA, the genetic interference? The fallen DNA meant we only saw through the 3D perceptions in the restricted bandwidth. The last type of human to do that is represented by Yeshua, Jesus, who came with the new DNA that allows us to either walk in that fallen DNA or walk in the expanded DNA of being sons and daughters of God again. When you awaken, what's the first thing that happens? You see the enslavement. Awakening could potentially be argued to be, if we look at it from what the ancients said, the deprogramming of the slave technology of the human organism, the deprogramming of the interference of the slave, the fallen DNA within us. And as you deprogram it away from that slave self, you begin to awaken, your perceptions awaken, you begin to see the world as it is, in a totally new light. Why is this important? Jordan Peterson is facing off against the Matrix. We can see that we're being led towards a new world order. We can see we're being led towards a very precarious situation there, because at the core of our leadership is no talk of the cultivation of compassion, of the capacity to physically know God's voice, which there is a capacity to do. And beyond there, we aren't being shown a correct worldview, which the very core of the design of that new world order are aware of. The very core designers of this are completely aware. And the thing that makes no sense is, how can that be? How can these humans just be born and they have this very short life and then they keep doing it? What if their life is not as short as you think? Because the higher dimensional force only requires the human organism to be out of alignment with the field of creation. Maybe it's living much longer, as the Muslim faith speaks of the jinn, who live for 1500 years and live in a society among our own that we can't see. The fallen ones are spoken of everywhere. This higher dimensional force that interfered with our reality, with this 3D matrix we live in. It's everywhere in our history books. And some of us have seen it. For whatever reason, Spirit gave us that capacity. But the important thing is that once you see it, you can conquer it. You see, their need is to move in humanity to extract the energy. They can only get into the body of humanity when the vessel is filled with the arrogance of the technology of the self-image, instead of the freedom of the presence of God. And that is the notion of God guides the humble. In those spaces of consciousness, what can be more humble than a human organism that has no self-image present, just the senses, the mind, the brain, surrendered to the present moment, and what is perceived by the narrower bandwidth as the supernatural guidance of God, the will of God, the will of unconditioned love, the will of the Christic for the organism that it is. When you see that, it starts to make a little more sense. Because all that matters is structuring the collective consciousness of the personas, and structuring that, if we are of little consequence. I had a conversation with the fallen ones and I put it on this channel, unexpectedly. That week I'd said to God, I'm having a crisis of authenticity. Whatever happens to me, I will share. The next thing that happened to me was that. I left my body and I appeared there during a meditation. They put it akin to driving a car and splatting bugs on the front of the car. You don't care, you're just going somewhere. They don't care, they're just going somewhere. They don't care what these stories that mean so much to humanity mean so much to us. To them it doesn't matter. It's just an extraction of energy. It's just coercing us towards a system where that extraction is whole, and the challenge to that extraction is over. The perfect battery. A planet where humans are impulsed to consume food and persistently impulsed to separate from the presence of God, and in that friction of separation, grieving God, and that grieving they use as fuel. Sounds so far out there, but if you're Christian, how can you not believe that? For you wrestle not against flesh and blood, but spiritual wickedness in high places. There is a demonic realm. It's a higher dimensional realm. When humanity truly expands and awakens, they get the new toolbox. When that happens, they have no space to move here. For vibration is the language of God, and vibration is the language of the fallen ones in this 3D reality. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. All things are sound and vibration. All things. When you were a mere egg in your mother's stomach being germinated, it was a certain vibrational frequency that triggered that egg to create proteins to start the construction of the body. It was the Word. Vibration is the language of the fallen ones. When you expand into the expanded bandwidth which they fight to restrict you from by selling you into sin as a regular way of life, selling your children into it, into taking energy from the 3D matrix, not finding the space where you can give energy forward, give the love that you feel by the presence of God. When you expand, not only can they not embody the organism that you are, but they can't embody the organisms around you. For as you expand into this energetic field of the matrix, you purify. And this is the toolbox that's missing for many. And if we try to fight a higher dimensional force without superseding their dimensional reach, which you can, that's your gift as a human. That's what Yeshua showed you. You can cast them out if you are a believer. If it's about awakening the sphere, the bandwidth of your awareness into the Christic. In that space you will develop capacities to drive them out. And if we all develop those capacities to drive them out, to overcome the fallen DNA, their sojourn in this world is over. They have no power. And so as you look out at the world and you see these problems, speak about them, do. But also know that unless we become inner engineers of the evolution to return ourselves to where we once were, as sons and daughters of God with the power that Christ promised we would have, then this fallen world continues to fall. Because we come to a river of light and we shout from downstream at those sowing upstream that we don't like what you're doing. And they don't care what you're shouting. But if you move upstream in that river of light and begin to sow the manifestations of change there, they have no dominion here in the 3D. Their power in the matrix is unplugged. This is the biblical worldview. I know. But it's also the truth. It's only in our modern time we can begin to see that we may have been mistaken. What our ancient forefathers said were demonic, we can call higher dimensional force species interfering with the journey of humanity in the hope to extract energy from our connection to source. I don't know how far the bandwidth goes and how far outside of the matrix we awaken. But I know some of us have put different work into life, and we should be heard, not dismissed as woo by the arrogant intellect as often does dismiss. We have no reason to say these things. We've seen them. We just hope it doesn't fall on deaf ears and more turn inward to awaken into the space where the Christic can purify through them as well and build through them, animate their intelligence and their actions. For God is the one with the wisdom to know the way out, not us and our intellect. Certainly not our intellect if it's only based in the 3D. God bless, guys. I guess that was all. Be well. Just want to take a brief moment of your time to share with you about an exciting project we have going with the charity until the end of the year. The project's name is 2000 Strong. It has gotten off to a great start and we thank those already involved. For those not involved, please stick around and hear why we are making this happen in the human story at this time. I'm going to give you an example of why our community is needed, why this solution is needed, and why 2000 Strong must manifest. This is Kelly. Kelly now lives safely in our community, in our village, in our family. However, when Kelly was found, her story was very different. Kelly had been starved to the point of near death. She had been burned and tortured by her father. This happened because in a society with very little education, in a society where superstition still surrounds things like disability, her father believed that her cerebral palsy was a demon and that he should fast this demon out of his daughter, that he should burn this demon out of his daughter. And of course, cerebral palsy is not a demon. It's a medical condition that needs to be cared for and nurtured, as we do at our children's village. Kelly now lives a good life. She's happy, she's full of joy, as it should have been all along. But Kelly is also one of the lucky ones, because there are a great many children out there who are still waiting to be found. 2000 Strong is a project to try and find 2,000 volunteers to fundraise a minimum of $100 each between now and New Year's Day. We say a minimum because if you go over, it may help. If we only get 1,000 volunteers or we fall short of 2,000, it's all welcome towards the goal. That money will be used to build stage 1 of a new village for special needs children in crisis, a village located a 10-hour drive away from our current location. When that village is done, it'll provide a whole solution for over 500 special needs children who are living in circumstances like this. At this time, I don't know of anyone else fighting for those children, and I can't do this without the resources I need. For whatever reason, you can hear my voice, and so I'm putting this out as a call to arms to help me to manifest this solution which is needed in our human story, as these children do not deserve to remain in the dark any longer. They need a safe, loving family home. 2000 Strong helps us to build stage 1 of that safe, loving family home and a permanent solution for the country of Tanzania forever. If you're interested, please visit www.sharetanzania.com/2000 Strong for more info, or you can reach out on any of our social media channels. Thank you for the love and support, guys. The work we do, the family we have, would not be possible without you.